Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. We're moving into a new meta very soon. We're coming up on the first set 12 tournament in PPG Miami. I will be there, so come say what's up if you're there. But anyways, guys, today we're gonna go over 10 cards you should side deck for January 2020. I know it's a bit late in January, but this is really the start of the new format, so kind of just how the timing worked out. But anyways, we're gonna get into the video. If you are new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell to miss a video. If you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways down in the description to do so. Particularly today, guys, if you want to buy or pre-order any of the cards you see in this video, make sure to use my link in the description to TCG Player. It does give the channel a kickback when you use that link, and it costs you no extra, and I really do appreciate it. That being said, let's jump into number one. So every time we do this video, the first card's always the same, but we have to talk about it. We just have to. Dark Power Black Mass Saiyan has been a side deck staple almost since it came out. There was a little bit of time where it wasn't super playable, but this thing has seen play in almost every format, and for good reason. I mean, it keeps really degenerate strategies in check unless they can answer it. And just like a quick tangent, I really like the way this card is designed, because it's not like the new Draft Box 6 Silver Bullets. It's not like Cronoa that we've had in the past, cards that just add a lingering effect on the game state. This card puts a really annoying hurdle in front of your opponent who is running a degenerate strategy, because if you're spamming cards by non-keyword skills, you're probably getting a lot of free play, and that is, you know, quote-unquote a degenerate strategy. But this card is completely 100% answerable. No barrier, no deflect. It's a 1-drop. It's only got 5k power. So many things in the game answer this, but you kind of put this out and tell your opponent, okay, you got to answer it. Otherwise, we're kind of just going to stand here while I wait for you to do something, right? So what is this card good against? Well, it's seen some play in set 11, and I don't think this card really shine in the set 11 meta. Like, if you think about the top set 11 decks, doesn't really do anything against Dark Broly, doesn't do much against Green Gotenks, doesn't do real much against Blue unless they go for Obuni, which Obuni's been seeing a lot less popularity lately. It was good against Red Broly until they got Piccolo Jr. Giant Force. Now it's in a weird spot against Red Broly, right? So I don't know. My thing is, if I'm able to play this turn 1, I probably will play it turn 1 against Red Broly, because I'll kind of put it on them to have the Piccolo Jr. Giant Force, because if they don't have the Giant Force, they really can't play. So that is really strong, and if they do play the Giant Force, they do get slowed down by an entire turn. A really strong thing you do with this card is that you can play it in Mecha Frieza, search it off Planet Vegeta for free, and then play it turn 1. So really playing a 1 of BMS in your main deck in Mecha Frieza is not really a big downside. In other decks, though, I don't know if I would bring it in just for Red Broly, but if you really need to buy a turn against Red Broly, I think it would be pretty solid there. It's also quite good against Vegex, but we know Vegex is seeing a big nerf in its power level. I think people will still play it. I think the deck will still be strong, especially if you're not prepared for it and don't quite know how to play against it and handle a really aggressive board. It still can put out a really aggressive board. So BMS is going to be getting against that matchup, but BMS is just so good against all the set 12 decks. Like, just listing them off, it's really good against Truman Salsa. It's relatively good against Gogeta Xeno when they try and pop off their 6-drop. It's really good against pure launch strategies. It's good against Pycom when they want to play cards off their Unison. Like, this card, for some reason, set 12 is all about spamming little dudes, and this card absolutely destroys those strategies. Again, they can answer it, but you're kind of putting it on them to answer it, and some decks will have a harder time answering it than others. So definitely got to recommend BMS as probably like a 3 of in most side decks for sure. Next up, guys, talking about Makika Bora. As of late, this card has also become a staple of this type of video, but we do have to talk about it. Much like BMS, this card hits so many decks in the meta, but this card's actually much better against set 11 decks than BMS is. So you have like Green Gotenks, right, calling Grim Reaper 6-drop. This card has big reach of the Red Broly matchup, and we pretty much know that because Dark Broly is maining this card, and it's one of their ways they're able to beat Red Broly so well. So for instance, if they're on their Awakened side, you can play this guy, call Broly BR4, then you can somehow pop their chain, and you can do that in just about any deck, but it's really easy in Dark Broly because you can get that removal for 0. So there you would call Broly BR4 drop, so they can't just replace the chain for free. Otherwise, if they're on their unawakened side, you can warp one of the pieces of their chain and then just call Broly BR1, so they can't start the chain from scratch at all. Just be mindful, if they're at 3 energy, they will hard cast a 3-drop and then awaken if they're able to and go up their chain. It's happened to me a few times. So you really got to read the game state to know how to use this card against Red Broly. It's not always quite as easy as just calling 4 or 1. Sometimes you got to call the 3 if the situation calls for it. But anyways, set 12, this card's still good as well. There are a few instances where you can call like Cell Xeno against some of the yellow decks like Whis. like Mecha Frieza, that's pretty good there as well. A lot of the set 12 stuff doesn't really rely on one big boss monster, but knowing the strategies more so in and out, you can kind of call this card, and you can, you know, call their main play for the next turn. Like playing against King Piccolo, for instance, you can call King Piccolo 6-drop if you know that that battle card is coming up relatively soon. If they started to spam the board with Demon Clan guys, you know they're probably going to start trying to tribute them to play their King Piccolo boss monster. There are a few ways you can use this in set 12. It is really good against set 11 decks, but the set 11 decks are still looking to be quite strong. Even some of the set 10 decks, even set 9, like Jiren, for instance. I think Jiren is going to see a lot of rise in popularity over the next couple weeks. So using this to call either their Cell Xeno or their Jiren 10 drop, they might be playing the Jiren 12 drop. That's kind of something you got to feel out. That card is much better against blue than the Jiren 10 drop is. So I think if blue is popular, they'd probably play the Jiren 12 drop, but I think for right now, you're probably going to be looking out for the Jiren 10 drop. And you can kind of tell, right? Like, if they're spamming the board of U11s, they're probably going for the 5 drop because he requires them to have U11s on the field. As where if they're going for the 12 drop, they're going to be waiting an extra turn. They're going to be putting their U11s in the drop area because that's what he requires. But just so you know, this card has a ton of reach in a ton of matchups, but I do think it is best used when you can play Makikabora and follow up with some type of pressure. That's why it's so good in Dark Broly. You can play it in Dark Broly, and then for 0 energy, you can get 1 or possibly 2 free 30Ks that both have devastating effects out. Other decks kind of have a tough time doing that. It's one of the reasons why, like in blue decks, for instance, I've kind of stopped maining Makikabora because I'll play Makikabora, but I can't do much else in that very turn. So it kind of doesn't really feel like I'm actually stopping my opponent all that much. I'm really just elongating the game by 1 turn, which granted in blue is definitely not bad, but just kind of my thoughts on the card. I think it's still amazing, but I think it's really for the right type of deck. Next up, we have Max Power Kamehameha. There are so many guys being cheated in before their actual energy cost of this format. This card is so strong. So the matchups we talked about already, you have Red Broly, you have Green Gotenks, you have Dark Broly. Some of the new stuff, you have King Piccolo 6-drop. Again, a lot of the new decks, they do play, you know, lower cost battle cards that they're kind of spamming out, but there's the occasional boss monster. You also have like Blue Gogeta from PyCon if you're expecting that at a local or at some type of event. But you do have just a lot of flexibility with Max Power Kamehameha. Another really good deck this is going to be great against is going to be Sin Shenron. Sometimes you just got to remove the 9-drop Sin Shenron. You got to get around their blockers. You cannot fall prey to the ability for them to basically cold bloodlust every single thing you play that turn. Man, that's a really dumb effect. But yeah, you got to be able to max power. You got to be able to remove their stuff, and sometimes that's going to allow you to go for games. So max power, definitely a staple sideboard consideration. Next up, guys, Dark King's Flash. So just how we talked about Max Power Kamehameha, this card is really only going to be useful against Sin Shenron. So it is a pretty narrow range of usage in your side deck, but it is going to be really, really good against or for certain decks. So the thing with Dark King's Flash is it prevents your opponent from playing cards off their leader skill, and that's really just going to hit Sin Shenron super, super hard. There are many decks you could play, mostly mid-range and sometimes other control decks, that are going to struggle against Sin Shenron because they don't have the aggro capability to end the game early like Dark Broly or Red Broly have. If you're playing like Soul Striker or Green Gotenks and you find that you're struggling against Sin Shenron, probably find some room in the side deck for Dark King's Flash, because if you make it to that late game, if you make it to that 6 energy, you won't just get blown out by their tap 6, play all their dragons from the drop area, right? So this card is going to be really, really good in my opinion in those mid-range side decks, in those control side decks that need to, you know, somehow find an answer to Sin Shenron's late game, because they really do have one of the best late games in the entire game. Barddock Fully Unleashed, once again, this is going to be a really good card against Sin Shenron if they do make it to that, you know, tap 6, if somehow you don't die from, you know, 8, 9, 10 attacks, right? This guy is going to come down. He's going to warp all of the Sin Shenron 9 drops. That is really good. A lot of times they won't have much other defense, especially if they just tapped out for 6. There are a few new of the Shadow Dragons that do offer them blocker, but I mean, dealing with 1 blocker as opposed to 3 or 4 is definitely going to be solid. And they might have Makikabora on the field, but still, like I just said, dealing with 2 blockers as opposed to, like, you know, 4+ blockers, that's going to be quite helpful. But another matchup this card's really, really good in is going to be Dark Broly. Sometimes they are going to go wide on the board, and if your deck is kind of hurting for removal, you may want to consider siding Barddock Fully Unleashed. Just play it, remove everything of 6 cost or more on the opponent's side of the field. This card's not going to be great against like Red Broly, because honestly, believe it or not, if you haven't played against the matchup much, they don't go into their 6-drop Broly all that frequently. They will do it when they're able to, but a lot of times they're either winning or losing the game before they get to that point. So definitely want to recommend this for Dark Broly and for Shenron. There might be the other occasional deck this is going to be good against as well. Sort of in the same vein, but kind of for like the opposite side of things, Secret Identity Masked Saiyan is going to be a really solid side deck consideration if you're not maining it already. A lot of decks, you know, will main 1 or 2 Overwhelms. It'll either be this, or sometimes it'll be like Barddock fighting against Fates or Goku Man on a Mission. This card is going to be much better against a lot of the set 12 stuff because, like I said, they do spam a board of pretty low cost cards. Like, again, Truman Salsa, pure launch strategies, Pycon while they're 1-drops. There's just a lot of strategies where this is going to do a lot of work against the set 12 decks. But even going back to the set 11 decks, this is going to be really good against Green Gotenks. And if you do have this in, let's just say you're trying to make a decision between this and Barddock Fully Unleashed, this is a really good card to go with if you're trying to like cut down the middle, because this card can hit a Broly 5-drop. This card can hit a you know, a couple of Boss to help you go for game. This card does have a lot of reach. If you're not maining it already, I would 110% consider side decking it. Protector of the People, this is one that I think is a good consideration if your deck is not blue, and 100% great consideration if your deck is black, because if you're lacking that Sensu Bean type of effect, which now like red kind of has and Shenron has, blue has always had, but other colors just and other strategies don't have access to that. Protector of the People, once again, going to be quite solid against those set 12 decks that are spamming low to the ground stuff, pretty much 15-20Ks. They're going to be attacking you. You're going to be ramping up your leader's power to make it much easier to defend. And in the right scenarios, this card's actually also really good against Red Broly if you catch them on the right swing. A lot of times, especially if you're not a black deck, they won't be playing around this card. So if they go leader swing first, you Protector the People, now every single battle card they go with is going to just like be harder and harder for them to deal damage. Likewise, this card is also really good against Vegex, so if you're expecting a lot of Vegex, this card is going to put in a lot of work. This is another card that I think a lot of people are maining. We're kind of in one of those formats that's like, you got to survive the Red Broly stuff, you got to survive the Dark Broly stuff, you got to survive the Vegex stuff, and if you survive that, you're looking to win on the clapback with either a massive hand or, you know, a sneaky double strike like this or some combination of that. And Champa is going to be one of those enablers for that to happen. Having Champa in your side deck, if not your main deck, is going to make winning those Red Broly matchups a lot easier. So I definitely think you guys should be teching 1 to 2 Champas in your side deck, again, if it's not in the main board already. Next up, we have Son Goku True Fighting Spirit. So overall, I've tried to keep this video as like generic as possible, that just about any deck can play, and I think a lot of the side deck considerations are very good considering how generic they are. This one gets a little bit less generic, but it is for a black Saiyan leader. If you're playing Vegex, if you're playing a Goku Xeno, if you're playing Black Mass Saiyan, this is playable in a wide range of decks, but unfortunately it's not playable in like every deck. But basically, if your opponent activates a counter skill, they choose a card in their hand and send it to their warp. So this is going to be quite good against decks like Mecha Frieza, decks like Invoker, things that are just more counter reliant, generally going to be mid-range and control decks. So if you're playing an aggro deck like Black tends to be, you're going to want this card in your side deck to really halt those counter heavy strategies. And finally, guys, the least generic card on this list, but I do think it's a really good one you're not going to want to look over, Vegeta Unison of Fury. Now, it's kind of weird to say, like, sideboarding Unisons. That's only been popular one time, as far as I've been aware. People used to side deck the Dark Broly Unison for, like, the Gotenks mirror match. So, it has happened before, but it is just a little weird to, like, think about siding a Unison, right? But anyways, Vegeta is going to be amazing against so many of the set 12 decks for Yellow, and Yellow is seeing a little bit of a resurgence with Mecha Frieza. Lots of people interested in Whis, and some people are playing the Frieza Rejuvenate deck, right? So this is going to be a good Unison, not in every single matchup, not in every single strategy, but one you might want to consider side decking because he's going to prevent those big Dark Brolys, those big Red Brolys, those big battle cards from attacking you. And honestly, in those decks, when they don't have the ability to attack with those big guys, it sometimes gets very difficult to remove this guy. Also, keep in mind if you have like a Vegeta Primal Transformation or some sort of sparking negate available to help protect this guy, or some sort of blocker, that's going to be a really good way to keep this guy in the game and make sure that you keep floodgating your opponent until you're ready to do what your deck wants to do, right? So overall, guys, that is going to be the video for today. I do hope you enjoyed it. I do hope it helps you out moving into set 12. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think. What cards are you going to be side decking this meta? And I will see you next time.